It's Sunday, January 14th, day 100 of the war with Hamas. Israel defends itself at The Hague, while families of the hostages call for their immediate release as tensions rise in the north. We'll have a live security briefing, then get analysis from Ambassador Ron Prosor and hear from a pro athlete who was in Israel's south on that fateful day 100 days ago. Keeping you up to date, I'm Michael Dixon, and this is Stand With Us TV Live.
Rachel, and I am the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Poland. He's my eldest child and my only son.
We are every person's nightmare.
I'm a mom and a teacher. What the world needs to start thinking about today is, what will your excuse be?
Hirsch, if you can hear me now, I want to see you tomorrow. I love you, my sweet boy. Stay strong and survive.
Shalom, we're live from Israel. And like our recent guest on this program, Rachel Goldberg Poland, I've taped a number to my chest. That number is 100. The number of days since Rachel's son Hirsch and countless other innocents were stolen from their homes and their lives. 100 days of hell for the families waiting for their loved ones to come home. 100 days of anguish, wondering what state they're in. 100 days since the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. On this 100th day, we must recommit ourselves to the task at hand. Our responsibility is to elevate the hostages so that they're not forgotten. Our task is to keep showing their faces and keep telling their stories, to remind people of the horror of October the 7th, and to recommit ourselves to fighting lies and misinformation about Israel and Jews on campuses, high schools, in the community, in print, on social media, and wherever we see it. We cannot get tired. That's what we do day in and day out, together with you at Stand With Us. The job is not finished on this 100th day. Never forget, never forgive, never again. In a moment, we'll head to Tel Aviv for a security briefing, but first, a roundup on last week of Israel at war. Relatives of Israelis kidnapped in Gaza are holding a vigil in Tel Aviv to coincide with a weekend of global demonstrations for their immediate release following 100 days in captivity. The CIA is providing intelligence to Israel about Hamas leaders and Gaza hostages. The US, UK, and allies struck Houthi terrorist sites in Yemen multiple times following their attacks on global shipping. Israel has rejected genocide claims at the International Court of Justice and panned South Africa's grossly distorted charges. Meanwhile, Hamas expressed support for South Africa. Hamas leaders have been embraced by South Africa's ANC leadership. Meanwhile, Israel supporters, including many non-Jews and Stand With Us staff, protested outside The Hague to denounce the unjust case against Israel. Let's get the latest now. Joining us live once again is former IDF International Spokesperson and Senior Fellow for the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Thank you for being with us. We witnessed something of an inquisition this week when the International Court of Justice began its first hearings, addressing a case initiated by South Africa, which slanderously accuses Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Let's debunk the premise of that case. Given your military experience, could you expand on why the genocide accusation is baseless and, in the words of US Secretary of State Blinken, meritless when it's applied to Israel's counterterrorism operation in Gaza?
Yes, hi, Michael. Thank you for having me again. It is, I think, not only meritless, which I think is a very diplomatic way of describing what South Africa has done. South Africa has, in fact, put itself alongside some of the most vile terror organizations in the world. Usually we ask ourselves, tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. Now, Hamas have friends in South Africa. They have friends in other horrible places around the world. The Iranian regime, which is the world's largest exporter of terrorism and violence and despair, and they now have a good and solid friend in South Africa, which is really a stain on that country's record. If anybody should be on trial for genocide, it should be Hamas, who openly say time and time again, and this is on record statements made by Hamas seniors before and after October the 7th, that they intend to do October the 7th again and again and again until they kill all the Jews and they take all of what they call Palestine. So if anybody should be on trial, it is them, not the IDF, which according to the IDF itself, but also according to how other militaries have seen and interacted with the IDF, can account to. We operate according to the laws of armed conflict. We respect humanitarian law. We apply the principles of distinction between combatant and non-combatant, and we try to strike to the best of our capabilities to strike the combatants and not the non-combatants. We apply force only where there is military necessity, and we try to use the minimum amount of force needed in order to achieve a military objective. And we have been very solid and stable with this from the first moment of fighting, despite the fact that we are facing an enemy that intentionally uses civilians as human shields and does everything in order to elaborate or to hire or to add to the number of non-combatant civilians that are killed. Our job and the IDF's job inside Gaza and fighting against Hamas is a very simple one. Nothing that the IDF is doing has any relation to genocide. We are fighting to defend our communities, the same communities that were attacked by Hamas in an unprovoked attack on the 7th of October. We are responding to that and defending our communities, and each and every action that we take on the battlefield is designed in order to dismantle that machine of terrorism that Hamas has built over many years and using much of the funds that were intended for Gazan people. And all of the actions that the IDF is doing is in order to defend Israeli civilians, defend Israeli communities, and make sure that Hamas won't be able to do it again. Last thing I'll say is that if Israel really wanted to do anything as vile and as unmoral as genocide, which is the furthest away from Israeli intentions as could be, then of course that would be possible and Israel could kill many, many more people. We have the weapons to do so, we have the technology. The only reason that hasn't happened is because that is not the intention, those are not our values, and that is not what we are there in Gaza to do. So if anybody should be on trial, it should be Hamas, and shortly after, South Africa, for being on the same level and supporting and bringing these baseless claims against Israel. They should be ashamed of themselves, and this is definitely a stain on South African history.
Absolutely. And elsewhere, we saw the US, UK, and allies strike at Houthis in Yemen. Why is this important in the unfolding conflict?
I think it's very important because we're seeing a shift in the bigger geopolitical picture here. For the first time, the world, or let's say the free countries of the world, are saying that, well, we understand that this is no longer an Israel issue, but that there are Iranian tentacles and Iranian terror organizations all over the Middle East that are not only trying to strike Israel, and Israel is fully capable of defending itself, but that they are now also jeopardizing global order, maritime shipping. They are affecting global economy, and this is something that will have ramifications for all over the world. International companies will postpone their production or their production dates, and that we might see a cascading effect on the global economy just because Iranian proxy organizations have a chokehold on one of the most important maritime arteries in the world. And that is a very dangerous thing. And I think that it is high time for the free and more independent and, should we say, responsible countries around the world to respond to these acts of aggression by the Iranian-backed Houthis. And I think that what we're seeing is the first, but not the last step. It'll be interesting to see how the Iranians will respond to this. They can escalate it further. They can use their own military assets in order to fire at international merchant ships, and that will be a terrible mistake on that side, on their side. Or they can continue to supply weapons to the Houthis and have them expose themselves to the retribution or the effective fighting that the US, the UK, and many other countries will bring forth. In any case, whatever happens, I think that anybody who's been following the events in the Middle East, reality is now very hard to not to focus on and see clearly. We are seeing Iranian destabilizing and terrorism all over the Middle East. This is not only about Israel. This is Iran acting as an enemy of global order, of free economy, of markets, of production, and that is something that needs to be addressed and addressed quickly and with great force and capabilities. And I'm happy to see that happening now. And hopefully that will not be the end of the process. And until Iranian proxies all over the region understand that their time is up, their time of destabilizing, of exporting terror and mayhem and poverty and misery all over the Middle East, those days should be counted. And the Houthis are now on the same list as Hamas and the Islamic Jihad as Iranian proxy organizations that are now in trouble because of their actions.
And of course, Hezbollah, also backed by Iran, making more trouble in the north. Today, attacks that left 2 Israelis dead. Mira Ayalon was 76 and her son Barak 45 when they were murdered by a Hezbollah anti-tank missile that was fired directly at their home. May their memories be a blessing. Has the situation with Hezbollah changed at all, or are we possibly looking at another war front opening up right now?
Unfortunately, Michael, we are looking very severely. We're staring down, I would say, the barrel of a loaded gun at the hands of a crazy extremist organization in Lebanon, Hezbollah, which is really doing an exercise in brinkmanship, the possible ramifications for the entire region, not only for Israel and for Lebanon, are nothing short of disastrous. And I think that it is very, very dangerous what Hezbollah is doing, that they are really threatening to drag the entire region into war. The state of Lebanon would suffer tremendously. Israeli civilians would be very much affected. The state of Israel would be affected. Of course, Israel would eventually win such an engagement with Hezbollah. There would be casualties in Israel. Thousands of rockets, tens of thousands of rockets would be fired at Israel. But at the end of it, as horrible as it may be, Israel will be victorious, but Lebanon will never be the same as it was before Hezbollah dragged Lebanon into this very, very reckless escapade. And there is still time, I think, for diplomacy to mediate the situation here and to prevent unnecessary fighting. We've already seen far too many casualties on the Israeli side. Many civilians have been killed by Hezbollah. There's more than 100,000 Israelis that are still outside of their homes. And I think that anybody watching can say that Israel has been extremely patient and tolerant with these acts of Hezbollah aggression, simply because Israel knows and understands the consequences and doesn't want to escalate the situation. But I fear that Hezbollah is misreading this, escalating the situation almost every week, and is misinterpreting the signs of patience and tolerance with weakness, something that I think will be a very, very dear endeavor for Lebanon. And I hope that the United States, France, the UN, and other parties in the region will find the capacity and the willingness to do a swift and effective diplomatic effort here in order to prevent war, because at the end of the day, Israel will have no choice. Israel needs to have its civilians back in their homes. That is a non-negotiable situation, and Israelis are outside of their homes. They are refugees in their own country for the last 100 days. That is an unsustainable situation that needs to end, and it needs to end with Israelis being back in their homes safely. As long as Hezbollah is deployed in southern Lebanon, close to the border, that is not the reality, and that needs to change. And Israel is still waiting for and hoping for that situation to be brought about, whereby a diplomatic solution is found. If it won't be found, then of course Israel won't have a choice than to take matters into its own hands and deal with the situation and bring security to Israeli civilians by use of military force, something that I think everybody in the region will regret.
And we saw last week the IDF expose a vast underground tunnel dug by Hamas under the city of Khan Yunis in Gaza. This tunnel was also used to hold hostages. Can you elaborate on this discovery? And from your vantage point, does it seem like we're getting closer to rescuing the remaining hostages?
Yeah, you know, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi spoke yesterday. He addressed the people of Israel, and he said, emphasized that each moment, each minute that goes by is 1 minute too many, and that no efforts are spared in the IDF in order to get our hostages home. And that, of course, there's the full empathy for the suffering of the families that are longing for their loved ones for more than 100 days now. Unfortunately, we have not yet seen the positive results that we are hoping for. The IDF is putting a lot of efforts into it, a lot of intelligence is being gathered, and rescue attempts have been made and are being made, but we are still not capable of getting our hands on hostages and getting them out safely. I have faith in the IDF. I have faith in the establishment and all of the other intelligence organizations that are working together day and night tirelessly in order to get Israelis out. And I trust that they will be able to get, hopefully, as many as possible Israeli hostages out. But, you know, looking at the screen, looking at the amount of effort that this terror organization has gone through, spending so much money that, of course, comes into the Gaza Strip, which is intended for humanitarian aid, which is supposed to build schools and hospitals and roads and mosques and what have you. Instead, Hamas has made this strategic long-term decision to focus so much to divert humanitarian aid, which has not been monitored, not been accounted for, not controlled or supervised by UNRWA or many of the other UN organizations that are supposed to be doing exactly that. They have dropped the ball terribly, and the infrastructure that we are facing, that Israel is facing now under Gaza, is a result of many years of Hamas diverting these funds and building material to build this underground network, this city of violence and terror, these cages where Israeli hostages were kept, and this elaborate network tunnel. But, you know, asking about Israeli advances, every day that goes by, another tunnel is dismantled. And every day that goes by, rocket launchers are dismantled and terrorists are killed inside and outside of tunnels. Terrorist commanders give themselves up. Operatives give themselves up and surrender to Israel. And every day that goes by, the situation from a Hamas point of view is worse and worse. The IDF continues to apply pressure on Hamas, and it will not relent until the last Hamas commander is dead or surrendered, and of course until we bring all of the hostages home.
And may that be soon. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, thank you for joining us every week on our program for the last 100 days. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
And if you enjoy our live show and want to be kept up to speed with everything that's happening in Israel, be sure to click on the subscribe button on YouTube. And you can keep our work going strong by donating at standwithus.com/donate. Thank you. Now, our next guest has served the state of Israel in some of the most pivotal posts and played a key role in shaping foreign policy for 3 decades. Former ambassador to the UK, the UN, and currently to Germany, Ambassador Ron Prosor joins us now from Berlin. Ambassador Ron Prosor, thank you very, very much for joining us on Stand With Us TV Live.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure, Michael.
It's really good to see you. And before we delve into the current crisis, I wonder if you can tell our viewers a bit about your family's background and how that influences and informs your work as ambassador for Israel in Germany.
So, look, when I was really a cadet in the foreign ministry, just entering the foreign ministry, I said I would really like to be Israel's ambassador to Germany. Why? Because it's closing a circle. My father, Ulrich Proskauer, and his sister, Lieselotte, and my grandparents, Berthold and Friedel Proskauer, lived here in Berlin, you know, in the center of Berlin. And they had to flee Germany because of Hitler. My grandfather, Berthold Proskauer, was a highly decorated officer. And just think that they were thrown out of Germany, and here I am returning as the ambassador of the nation state of the Jewish people to Berlin. Now, Michael, you know that I was ambassador to the United Kingdom, or better said, to the Court of St. James. And I presented my credentials with my wife, with a carriage and 4 white horses. My wife bought a hat that we are still paying mortgage on. And it was emotional with Queen Elizabeth II. But for me personally, to present my credentials to the President of the Federal Republic of Germany, thinking about my father up in heaven, that was really emotional. So I have a very clear passion in the sense this is not just my profession, but my calling in being Israel's ambassador here. And as you know, I speak fluent German. So it's also the ability to convey messages to the big German public. And this relationship, Germany-Israel, between the Jewish people and German citizens, is really, I feel, it's my calling.
So important and a real full circle moment. Incredible. And so how have the atrocities of October the 7th and the ongoing war changed Germany's relationship to Israel and your approach to diplomacy? And on a more personal level, how does it feel being an Israeli Jew today in Germany in light of the Hamas massacre?
So I'll start by saying that from the start, from the day after, Germany, under the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, basically said that the only side Germany could stand by is on Israel's side, and turned that, you know, these words to actions. So in the sense, in the German parliament, the Bundestag, all the parties came together and basically said, we want to control the money that went over in this direction to different organizations. So they started doing that. They also went after, you know, organizations like Samidum and put them in, you know, under the supervision of their equivalent of the FBI, put Hamas on the terrorist list. And Germany, you know, I think from all countries in Europe, it's unprecedented the amount of visits to Israel from the President of Germany, to the Chancellor, to the Foreign Secretary, to the Minister of Defense, the President of the German Parliament, and the President of his Foreign Relations Committee. They all came to Israel, most of them with me, saw with their own eyes in Be'eri, Kfar Aza, the atrocities that happened, and came back to Germany understanding with the German history towards Jews and Israel. Germany has the moral obligation to really stand with Israel. And it's not easy because like in everywhere, you have many voices from the left and many, you know, Muslims here. You have anti-Semitism from the left, from the right, but especially anti-Semitism from many that came here from Syria, from Afghanistan. In the sense, back to your second question, Jews today in Germany, in Berlin, and in different other places fear going in, you know, the underground with a kippah. Israelis are afraid to write on, you know, cell phones in Hebrew or talk Hebrew. And just think, we have swastikas being put on doors where Jews are living, and this is Germany 2023. But, Michael, I have to tell you, the German government and the German, I would say, authorities on all sides are doing their utmost to go after this. They took it as something which is a serious threat to the German society, and we can all salute them for really understanding the gravity of this problem.
And Germany coming once again to stand by Israel's side this week. I wanted to ask you, context, the word context seems to be the word of the month. We heard it in the infamous US congressional hearings with some current and now they are former college presidents. And many Hamas apologists also use the term context to try and deflect attention from the atrocities of October the 7th. From your experience, what key pieces of context do you find your audiences to be most ignorant about when it comes to Israel, Hamas, and the conflict?
I think that there's really deep ignorance in, the Hamas ideology that we trivialize, we in Israel, but especially in the Western world. Basically, Hamas writing and saying very clearly, we want to annihilate the state of Israel. We want to throw the Jews into the sea. Every Jew, and I'm merely, citing, that hides behind a tree should be taken out. And in the sense, what did we say? We said, okay, those are Arabs. They're just saying this. We're trying to contain that. We'll show them if we give them work, if we basically try and give them better, living circumstances, they'll rethink because they also have families, they also have children. The whole line of thought can be changed. And I think the thing that we all have to learn is that we cannot trivialize this ideology. What's happening in Gaza now, yes, we have to take the infrastructure of Hamas out. We have to take its leadership out. And then I'm asked, but what about the ideology? The ideology will stay like in ISIS, but we have to make sure that we cannot use this ideology and turn it into a slaughtering machine. So we have to make sure that they don't have it. So the bottom line is the ideology. The ideology is already in Europe. You can see them marching in the streets. You can see them basically in Germany calling to create a new caliphate. They are a Trojan horse of the German democracy. They're using and abusing it. And I think there's a wake-up call to understanding in usually a pacifist society like Germany that they have to really deal with it today or they will cry tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that that's a reckoning that's coming to a lot of different capitals, and hopefully they are seeing that awakening. And of course, you're a former UN ambassador. So how do you assess the international response or lack thereof following October the 7th? And are there any practical steps that Israel and its allies can take to change the systemic discrimination that Israel faces in the international arena, and particularly the UN?
So, Michael, Jonathan Conricus was before me. Jonathan was at the UN. I think I had something to do with that in the peacekeeping forces. And when I look at the UN, and you know that very little can surprise me, I am surprised. I'm surprised because I wrote a whole bloody book. I hope the English version will come out in 2 months. You see, this is a way for me to market my book.
Excellent.
But in the sense, there is an institutional and a structural bias against Israel. At the UN, the demonization and delegitimization that goes on in this body for years came out now so big. Just think, UN women, but not just UN women. You look at UNRWA, you look at nearly every UN organization. I know most of our listeners don't know what OCHA is. I won't have time to go into this. But you see UN organizations that basically get paid in order to demonize and delegitimize Israel. And the problem, Michael, is not just the bad guys. The problem is, in parentheses, sometimes the like-minded countries in their voting patterns at the UN, And in the sense, we have to really stand together and make this a point. We cannot continue with this. And for example, organizations like UNRWA that perpetuate the issue of refugees, that create a situation where they really, most of the activists out there are connected to Hamas. We have to find ways to get the World Food Program, bringing food in. We need to get UNHCR, which deals with refugees all over the world, to take parts of the sense with UNRWA. And we have to understand that we really have to address the issue of ideology. Education, education, education is the key, and we have to deal with it.
And so let's speak for a moment to the normalization process that was going on between Israel and the Arab states in the region. In light of October the 7th, do you foresee a potential resumption of talks between Saudi Arabia and Israel about normalization?
So I'm a born optimist in a sense, and I want to remind our viewers that I was the Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry when Sharon decided to disengage unilaterally out of Gaza. So in the sense, what was the logic there, Michael? The logic was, okay, we will try and change the equation. We don't have anyone to speak with. We'll change the equation. We'll create a situation where what we defined as our national security interests, we will go out, take out 22 settlements, but also 4 settlements in the West Bank to show that there's political horizon. And they will turn, Gaza into Singapore. They turned it into Darfur. So that was a really serious narrative. But Hamas has a different narrative. It basically said, look at Israel running out of Gaza. Why are they running out? Because of terror and violence. We'll continue terror and violence. And I think that we have to make sure that out of this tragedy, out of this catastrophe, we will create a new opportunity. Because if they're not there, I think we were very close to really doing something with the Saudis, with American help. I think if we really take out the leadership and the infrastructure, we can resume that, and we can resume that even before the American election. So in the sense, I'm optimistic, it can change. We have to really use this catastrophe in order to create change and find the relevant partners for us and with whom we can really sit down around the table. And it's not Hamas.
Now, I have one final question for you, Ambassador, but before that, let's look at a video that you posted recently of anti-Semitic vandalism in Berlin.
We are here in the Holocaust Memorial, Trains to Life, Trains to Death, here in Berlin. The memorial was vandalized yesterday. This shameful act is disgracing the memory of the Holocaust. When we talk about Muslim anti-Semitism, this is its true face. It's not another statistic. It's not a graph that ends up in a police report. The people who did this are demonizing and delegitimizing the memory of the Holocaust. It's time for swift and decisive action that will protect German citizens from similar attacks on their democratic values. Anything less is unacceptable.
And we spoke about the perpetrators of this kind of violence, but I'd like to know, what is your message to the Jewish people and friends of Israel, and particularly those in the diaspora who may be feeling isolated and worried following the Hamas massacre and the ensuing spike in anti-Semitism? What's your message to them?
My message to them is how important it is that we all stick together, Michael. Hamas didn't make a differentiation between Orthodox Jews, secular Jews, left-leaning, right-leaning, fat or thin. They went after all of us. And we, with the way we basically argue with each other, we give each other heart attacks. I think what we learn is that we have to stick together. Because when we stick together with our passion, with our values, with our democratic concept of how we should live, as a Jewish democratic country, I think when we are together, we are unbeatable.
Absolutely. And we hope people will take that message to heart. Thank you so much for all that you do in service of the state of Israel and for joining us and for being such a wonderful friend of Stand With Us throughout your career. Ambassador Ron Prosor, thank you very much.
Michael, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you on the work that you're doing, which I know very well. And I salute you and really compliment you. Keep doing the amazing work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Wonderful to speak to Ambassador Ron Prosor live from Berlin. Now, our next guest is a Jewish American pro athlete playing basketball in Israel, and he was in the south of Israel on that fateful day on October the 7th as Hamas rockets rained down. Jared Armstrong joins us now. Jared, thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, Michael, how you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. And tell us what it was like for you on that fateful day now 100 days ago on October the 7th.
Honestly, it was a life-changing experience. I played here in Israel for 3 years, and it was kind of my first time experiencing, rockets and missiles so close, being, 20 kilometers from Gaza, and I never played in the South. So I remember getting a call around 6:30 in the morning from my coach, and I'm looking at the phone. I'm like, why is he calling me? And we had a game the day before, so it was our day off, and it was Shabbat. And I answer and I say, what's up, coach? He says, listen, Jared, there's going to be some rockets and missiles that come in, just stay in your room, which is a mamad, and, whatever you need from your living room, just grab it and go back to your room. It should be rockets and missiles pretty much throughout the whole day. And then obviously an hour later, we find out it's a surprise attack. And I just really didn't know what to do. I kind of contemplated. I was reading, obviously, on Instagram, and you start hearing the phone calls. So I had a friend of mine whose girlfriend was Israeli, and he calls me. He says, hey, you know what's going on? And he was basically just giving me an update. He was like, man, you need to get out of there. You need to come closer to the north. And I would say about 2 hours later, I ran down to my teammate's room because we live in the building together. And he happened to be asleep. So long story short, I ended up waking him up, and we ended up basically taking a risk, leaving the south of Ashkelon and driving through the road. It was a lot of pit stops where, Israeli police and army were pulling people over just to make sure you weren't terrorists. And we ended up stopping in Tel Aviv because we didn't have any food. So we stopped there, and after we get the food, we get pulled over by a police officer. And the police officer basically just asks us, like, what are you doing outside? Do you know what's going on? And he literally tells us, head to Ramat HaSharon and don't come out your house for a few days. So we literally ended up staying there for about 5 to 6 days during the war. And it was truly just a life-changing experience for me.
And I know that you recently visited the sites of the atrocities. You went back down south and took a look at what's been going on. What was that like?
So I recently went to Kfar Aza and Nir Oz, and honestly, I can't even really put it in words. I recently made a video, and I told people, it's crazy that, many don't even believe that October 7th happened, but you really just have a lot of empathy, sympathy for all the families that, their kids, their babies, themselves, their grandmother, grandfathers. And, I walked through burnt houses. I got the chance to speak to people that were living there. The guy that was our tour guide in Euros. So for me, it was a chance to really show the world what was going on. And I mean, I really can't put into words, what I experienced walking through there. I mean, every house has its own story, and it's really tough to just walk through there and feel it.
And you've been such an active voice in speaking up for the hostages and sharing the reality of Israel on mainstream media, on social media. Why is it so important for you to use your platform this way at this time?
Great question. I mean, pretty much since October 7th happened, literally that next day, I started talking to media outlets just because I wanted for the world to see it from my eye point of view, being both African-American and Jewish and being an athlete. They always look at us for answers, for everything. And I just felt, people were going to obviously read social media propaganda, and, the truth wasn't going to be told. So literally from October 8th, I was in Israel for 6 days. I experienced it myself. So I wanted to tell people what it was like, living in a war zone. A lot of people didn't know before October 7th. My dad was in 9/11. He was in the Pentagon when it was when an airplane went into it, and he had just happened to be on the other side of the building. And he was actually a Navy corpsman, so he had to clean up a lot of the bodies. So for me, terror, I'm not a person that loves terror. Nobody should. And you're really starting to find out that many people support terrorism, and it's really wrong. So for me, it was just an opportunity to, number one, as a Jewish person, support my own people. Number two, show the world what was truly happening. And number three, as an athlete, I saw there weren't many athletes that were speaking up, and many players that play here. I wanted to pretty much use my platform as a niche to be a person that advocated.
And you played a part in a campaign called Sport Speaks Up. Let's take a look at that for just a moment.
E-Town is 12 years old. He is a huge fan of Manchester City. On October 7th, E-Town was separated from his family and kidnapped to Gaza. E-Town can't speak. We, the athletes of the world, must speak for him now.
Ariel, a 4-year-old child full of life, full of joy, was kidnapped October 7th. Ariel can't speak now. We athletes of the world must speak for Ariel. We must speak for him now.
And so a whole host of sports personalities took to social media. Here's a post that you put up. We can see that there. And actually, we see that you're there speaking up for Idan Shtivi, who's still kidnapped in Gaza to this day. And let's take a look also at a video that you made for a boy whose family was tragically murdered on October the 7th.
I can't imagine the pain and suffering you're experiencing right now. Little do you know, you inspire me every day. October 7th is a day that has changed your life forever. But I want to let you know you've gained a new brother. I hear you're a basketball lover, just like me. So when I'm back in Israel, I'd love to meet you. And oh yeah, we're going to check it out one-on-one. As your bar mitzvah is approaching, I wanted to tell you Mazel Tov. My thoughts, my prayers, and my condolences are with you. You are not alone. I'll see you soon.
Really beautiful messages and posts that you've put up. What's your message to other figures in sports about how they can shine a light on the plight of the hostages?
I mean, for me, it's just, I always tell people, the reason, obviously, just outside of me being Jewish, is you never truly understand somebody until you're in their shoes. And I always tell, athletes, that could have easily been me. I could have, if it wasn't for the IDF, I could have either been dead or kidnapped. Whatever you've been spoken up for me. I always tell you, it has nothing to do with your religion. It has nothing to do with your belief system, your cultural background. At the end of the day, these are innocent people. Some of them are big. One of them is a baby. What did he do to terrorism? Nothing. So I think a lot of people put their political or religious views behind it, and it has nothing to do with the situation. These are 136 innocent hostages, that were taken from their families for no reason. And I try to tell athletes of mine, speaking up is just the right thing to do. Sometimes in life, it's just being a good person and fighting for what is right. It has nothing to do, with anything else. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that, and they don't pretty much see it from why I'm doing it. I've been questioned millions of times. You're just an athlete. You're supposed to just be dribbling a basketball. And I tell people, my public advocacy came from my experience. It came from October 7th happening. Outside of that, I started an initiative to combat anti-Semitism and racism and hate, just because I saw where the world was at. And, it's needed, for people like me and others, athletes or not, to speak up and fight for what is right.
And you're also, of course, running basketball camps, JAB, or is it JAB camps for young people? Jab. So you're jabbing racism, you're jabbing anti-Semitism. Tell us what's unique about these camps that you're running.
I had this really small-minded idea, Michael. I mean, I remember going home in the summertime and during the off season, just getting back from Israel. And I just found, as a person that always worked hard, what can kids abstract from basketball? Only 1% of us are blessed to play professional sports, and I felt it was really a niche, especially in American society, where kids aren't really learning how to bridge the gap between other communities. So I really wanted to start an idea to combat anti-Semitism, racism, and hate, pretty much just bridging the gap between kids from all different ethnic, cultural, and religious backgrounds, really focusing on the African American and Jewish community, with just being me having the intersectionality between being Black and Jewish. And most people don't know one of the most common things that Jewish people and Black people have in common is they both love basketball. So I felt it was just a beautiful way to, bridge and help kids create lifelong friendships. For me, I have friends from 5th grade, 6th grade basketball camp, that I still talk to today. And I felt it was a good way to educate them. My camps this upcoming summer will teach them actually a course on anti-Semitism and racism education, financial literacy, and nutrition. I want basically to use basketball as an educational tool where kids, if you don't make it, you can still be able to create and build bonds between other people. Number 2, you can also play basketball in a fun way, or use the game to use basketball for a way to make money other ways, become a trainer, work as a general manager or work for the NBA. So I think there's other ways outside of just playing that kids can abstract things from basketball.
Super inspiring and important. And just before we go, what's your message to people, and especially young people who may be anxious about the current situation with rising anti-Semitism, everything that's coming as a result of this conflict? What's the message you want to leave them with?
My message is really to just have hope, find a spot of inspiration. Listen, we all go through dark times as people, as a generation, as a whole, and you have to find, excellence in the midst of adversity. We all go through it individually. And as Jewish people, we have gone through it, for centuries, but we always prevail. So my guess and my, specific word is just to have hope, to look at the end of the tunnel, try to shed some light, try to help others. That's what I'm trying to do while I'm in Israel, is just shed some light during a dark time. You never know what someone's going through.
Absolutely. And Jared, thanks so much for raising your voice, and thank you for joining Stand With Us today.
Thank you for having me, Michael, and continue the great work.
Thanks so much. All the best. And before we go, a beautiful video of support for Israel from South Africa. That's coming up in just a moment. But before that, a reminder that you can get updated by following Stand With Us on our WhatsApp channel, or by going to standwithus.com/Situation Room. And you can help us battle anti-Semitism and educate about Israel while giving legal support to students in the BDS crossfire. Keep us strong by going to standwithus.com/donate. So while this week South Africa's government took Israel to the International Court of Justice, this weekend South Africans came together to offer a counterpoint and to mark these 100 days. Take a look. with thanks to our friends at the South African Zionist Federation. Now, just launched registration for the Stand With Us International Israel in Focus Conference, a fascinating, unifying, empowering weekend in Los Angeles for anyone who wants to stand up, fight anti-Semitism, and support Israel. I'll be there, and I'd love to see you there too. It's March 1st till 3rd. Go to standwithus.com to register. And well done to all those rallying around the world this week, from New York to Denver to Texas to Chicago to Los Angeles, from London to The Hague. We see and feel your support wherever you are. Join us again next week. Keep following Stand With Us social media for updates, and you can start by sharing this briefing with your networks. We're sending love to the Israeli troops and to our brothers and sisters and allies worldwide, and our prayers for every single hostage to be back home with their family soon, not one day more than 100 days. Together, we will prevail. Thank you for watching. Yisrael Chai.